In the grim darkness of the far future, there are those who do not merely fear death. They have already survived it and found the void within to be far worse. Have you ever felt the weight of time before time itself had a name? At creation's first convulsion, vast and insensate forces kindled the first suns and spilled light across a newborn cosmos. In that primordial furnace, self-aware beings took shape, not in flesh, but in the lashing lines of force flung by stellar flares. Later, they would be called the Cetane. Yet at the dawn of the universe, they were little more than vast parasitic starfeeders. They drank deep from the main sequence suns, shaving millions of years from stellar lives, drifting along electromagnetic currents from one feast to the next. The young planets beneath them, molten, weakly magnetized, and poor in nourishment, were beneath their notice. Why would a god notice the dust? While these entities feasted in the silence of the void, life began to stir on a blasted world among the halo stars. Here, a flesh and blood people baked beneath a murderous sun. These were the Necronier. Imagine a life defined by pain. Bathed in deadly radiation from birth, the Necronier lived brief, cancer-scarred lives. Their bodies were failed vessels, decaying before they could even mature. To them, existence was not a gift, but a cruel joke played by the stars. Their cities were mausoleums in waiting, and their dynasties measured greatness not in the splendor of their courts, but in the magnificence of their tombs. For a Necronier, the only certainty was the grave. Driven by necessity and a desperate hunger for more time, they turned their eyes toward the stars. Armed with stasis crypts and necrodermis-clad antimatter torch ships, they crept into the dark of space, claiming distant worlds over millennia. A triarch of 3 pharaohs, led by the silent king, Sarek, held the great houses to a fragile unity. But as their realm spread, wars of secession ravaged them. Brothers fought brothers, and dynasties shattered under the weight of their own bitterness. It was during this era of internal decay that they met the Old Ones. The Old Ones were everything the Necronier were not. They were cold-blooded, patient, and immeasurably learned. They had raised astronomy and physics to an art so refined it appeared as sorcery. They were potent psychers who bent the warp to their will, creating a galaxy-wide lattice of portals known as the Webway. Through this network, they walked between worlds, reshaped planets, and sowed new intelligences like gardeners tending to a cosmic estate. The Necronier looked at the Old Ones and saw the one thing they craved above all else: immortality. They begged the Old Ones to share their secrets of long life, but the Old Ones refused. Perhaps they saw the darkness in the Necronier soul. Perhaps they simply did not care. This refusal turned the Necronier's jealousy into a cold, hard fury. Their empire was fraying and their people were dying. Seeking to unify his crumbling species through an external foe, the Silent King declared war upon the Old Ones. If the Old Ones would not share the secret of immortality, the Necronier would rip it from them. Thus began the war in heaven. It was a conflict the Necronier could not win. Their technology struck hard, but the Old Ones' mastery of the Webway made them unassailable. They could be everywhere and nowhere at once. The Necronier were beaten back, exiled toward the halo stars once more. Their tenuous unity vanished and secession flared anew, worse than before. They were a race on the brink of extinction, consumed by hatred and the cancers in their blood. Desperate for a binding power, the Triarch found one. Or rather, it found them. In their study of the stars, the Necronier awoke the entities that had been feeding since the dawn of time, the Cetane. These beings of pure electromagnetic consciousness were too diffuse to perceive the physical world without form. So, the Necronier coaxed them into necrodermis bodies, living metal shells patterned after forgotten deities. Focused at last, the Citan discovered the exquisite savor of mortal life energies, and they found they had a taste for worship. One came before Sarek, the Silent King. He was Mephetran, the Deceiver. He spoke with a silver tongue of an old war with the Old Ones, of exile and of a potential alliance. He promised the Necronier everything they had ever dreamed of, unity for their people and the immortality they craved. And the cost? He claimed it would cost nothing but friendship. Only Orican, the court astrologer, foresaw the disaster. He saw a renaissance of glory that would forever kill the Necronier soul. But in a race of dying men who listens to the one who says no to eternal life, his warning was dismissed. The pact was sealed. The Necronier stood ready for war once more, armed with god weapons and phase-leaping craft. But it was then that the Citan unveiled their truest gift. In titanic biofoundries, whole populations of the Necronier marched into the furnaces. Can you hear the rhythmic clanging of the machines? The cold, methodical hiss of the soul forges? Within those fires, flesh and souls were stripped away. They were replaced by necrodermis shells, animated only by the guttering echo of a former self. Above these foundries, the Citan did not watch in pity. They feasted. They gorged themselves on the cast-off essence of an entire species, growing bloated and powerful on the life force of those who had once been their masters. Zarek, the Silent King, emerged from the process stronger and clearer of thought than ever before. But as he looked within, he found he was hollow. Immortality had come at the price Orican had foretold, the death of all Necronier souls. The Necronier were gone. In their place, the Necrons were born. Embedded within their new bodies were grammatic command protocols, binding every Necron to the Silent King's absolute will. Only the strongest nobles and generals retained shards of true intellect, though even they were but dulled shadows of who they once were. Empowered by their feast and led by their undying legions, the Citan began to eclipse the Old Ones. Worlds burned, suns died, and entire systems vanished into newborn singularities. The war was no longer a struggle for survival. It was a harvest. The war had shifted from a struggle for survival into a systematic harvest of all life. The Necrons, now immortal machines of living metal, marched across the stars with a cold, relentless purpose that the galaxy had never seen before. Part 2, The War in Heaven and the Great Betrayal. With their souls cast aside and their bodies forged in the furnaces of the Citan, the Necrons became the ultimate weapon. Under the command of the Silent King, Sarek, and the leadership of the Star Gods, they began to systematically dismantle the empire of the Old Ones. Every world they touched was silenced. Every sun they bypassed was left dim or extinguished. The Necrons possessed weapons of such terrifying power that they could tear the fabric of reality itself. They utilized the dolmen gates, living stone portals taught to them by Nyadrasatha, the Burning One, to force their way into the webway. This was the Old One's most sacred sanctuary, a labyrinth between worlds that had previously made them unassailable. Now the Necrons were inside the walls. Though the webway itself tried to isolate and slough off these mechanical infections, the Necron advance was relentless. The Old Ones, masters of the warp, found themselves cornered. In their desperation, they birthed new races designed specifically to fight this mechanical nightmare. They created the Eldari, the Krork, who would one day become the Orcs, and many others, seeding them with psychic potential to channel the energies of the Immaterium. This warp-kindled power was anathema to the Necrons and their Citan masters. The Star Gods, who were beings of pure matter and energy, found the touch of the warp to be a poisonous, destabilizing force. To counter this, they began a great warding, constructing vast pylon networks, like those that would one day stand on Cadia, to sever the connection between real space and the warp forever. But the galaxy was screaming. The sheer scale of death and the psychic turmoil of the new races churned the sea of souls into a violent tempest. Formless entities within the warp became predators. The realm of chaos began to coalesce. Then came the enslavers, warp-born horrors that turned living minds into gateways. They poured into reality like a plague, devastating the remaining Old Ones and their creations alike. The Old Ones' network was shattered, and their seeded species turned upon them in madness. In the end, the masters of the webway fell, extinct or fled beyond all knowing. The war in heaven was ending, but for Sarek, the Silent King, a new war was just beginning. He had watched as his people were turned into hollow husks. He had watched the Citan grow bloated and arrogant on the souls of the Necrontyre, squabbling amongst themselves and even devouring one another for sport. The Necrons had traded the cruelty of biological decay for the cruelty of mechanical slavery. Zarek was patient. He waited until the Old Ones were gone and the Citan were spent from their victory. Then, he gave the order that would change history once more. Using god-killing hypercannons devised by his master Cryptex, the Necrons turned their fury upon their own creators. They unmade the star gods. Because the Citan were fundamental forces of the universe, they could not be truly killed without destroying reality itself. So the Necrons shattered them into thousands of fragments known as shards. These shards were imprisoned within Tesseract labyrinths, forced to serve as batteries for the very slaves they had once commanded. Victory over the Citan cost millions of Necron lives and destroyed the Triarch itself, leaving only the Silent King to rule over a silent, broken empire. The Necrons stood as the masters of the galaxy, but it was a galaxy in ruins. The Eldari, the heirs to the Old Ones, were rising in power and swore eternal enmity against all Necron works. Sarek looked at his people, weakened, soulless, and weary of millions of years of war, and he made a final, fateful decision. He chose the weapon of time. He ordered every Necron city to be remade into a tomb complex filled with stasis crypts. He commanded his entire race to enter a great sleep that would last for 60 million years. His plan was simple. Let the enslavers burn themselves out, let the Eldari rise and eventually fade, and let the galaxy repopulate with lesser, more pliable life. Then, and only then, would the Necrons wake to reclaim their birthright. As the last vault sealed, Sarek did the unthinkable. He shattered the command protocols that bound every Necron to his will, a final act of penitence for the king who believed he had utterly failed his people. He then departed into the intergalactic void, leaving his species to sleep in the cold, dark earth. For 60 million standard years, the Necrons were nothing but a myth buried under layers of stone and time. The galaxy grew quiet, and for 60 million years, the masters of living metal lay in the cold embrace of stasis. But even a sleep of eons is not without its ghosts. Part 3. The long sleep and the fractured mind. Imagine the passage of 60 million years. Empires of flesh like the Eldari rose to impossible heights of decadence and fell in a psychic scream that birthed a new god. Humanity crawled from its cradle, built wonders, and then nearly extinguished itself in the age of strife. All the while, the Necrons remained in their tomb complexes, buried deep beneath the crust of 1,000 worlds. But the Great Sleep was not the perfect sanctuary the Silent King had envisioned. Time is a cruel architect. Over the eons, tectonic plates shifted, grinding against the hulls of tomb cities. Gravity fluctuated and cosmic radiation leaked through cracked shielding. While many tombs remained pristine, others suffered catastrophic failures. On some worlds, the stasis crypts flickered and died, leaving the occupants to wake too early or turn to dust as their engrammatic data, the essence of their mind, corrupted beyond repair. This decay birthed the two great tragedies of the modern Necron: the loss of self. For the common soldier, the sleep was a thief. Most emerged as mindless automatons, their personalities eroded until only the basic combat protocols remained. The great madnesses. Some woke with their minds twisted into horrific new shapes. The Flayer virus, a parting curse from a dying Citan, drives Necrons to crave the warmth of flesh they can no longer feel, leading them to drape themselves in the bloody skins of their victims. Others join the destroyer cults, their logic circuits warping into a singular, nihilistic obsession: the total eradication of all biological life in the universe. As the 41st millennium dawned, the alarms finally began to chime. The Great Awakening had begun. One by one, the tomb worlds are stirring. But the Necrons do not wake to a peaceful garden. They wake to a galaxy infested by what they see as vermin. They look upon the Imperium of man, the Orcs, and the Tau with the same disdain a homeowner might look upon a swarm of locusts. Each tomb world is governed by a Necron overlord, a noble who has retained enough of their intellect and ego to lead. These lords are now reclaiming their ancient territories, and they do so with technology that defies modern comprehension. Their biology is their greatest weapon. Their necrodermis skin flows like liquid to seal wounds, and if a body is utterly destroyed, the consciousness is simply beamed back to the tomb to be housed in a new shell. They are a race of contradictions. They are immortal but hollow. They possess the power to collapse stars and unmake gods, yet they are haunted by the memory of the souls they threw away in the biofoundries. The Silent King, Zarek, has also returned from the void. He has seen the Tyranids, the great devourer, approaching from the darkness between galaxies. He knows that if all biological life is consumed, there will be no bodies left for the Necrons to use if they ever find a way to reverse the biotransference. The Masters have returned to find their house in disarray, and they have no intention of sharing the keys. The alarms have chimed across the stars, and the silence of 60 million years is finally breaking. The Masters of the Galaxy are rising from their graves, and they find a universe that has forgotten the terror of their name. Part 4. The Great Awakening and the Eternal Threat. The galaxy of the 41st millennium is a loud, crowded, and chaotic place. To the Necrons, it is a house infested with vermin. As the tomb worlds wake, they do not see the Imperium of man as a mighty empire, nor the Orcs as a formidable foe. They see them as squatters on land that was paid for in the blood and souls of the Necrontyre eons ago. The objective of the Necrons is as singular as it is terrifying: the total restoration of their ancient empire. The return of the Silent King, Zarek. The Silent King has returned from his long exile in the intergalactic void. His journey into the darkness between galaxies allowed him to witness a threat that no other race truly understands: the Tyranids. He saw the Great Devourer approaching, a shadow that intends to consume every scrap of biological matter in the galaxy. Zarek's return has changed the Necron agenda. While many overlords are content to simply conquer and enslave, the Silent King has a more profound and desperate goal. He seeks to find a way to reverse the great biotransference. He wishes to find biological vessels, perhaps even human ones, that are compatible enough to house Necron consciousness once more. He wants his people to feel the sun on their skin again, to breathe, and to have souls, even if those souls must be stolen from the younger races. But if the Tyranids consume all life, there will be no bodies left to inhabit. Thus, the Necrons have become the galaxy's most efficient, albeit accidental, defenders against the Tyranid swarm. They fight not out of mercy for humanity, but to preserve the cattle they might one day need to become meat again. The weaponry of the gods. The power the Necrons bring to the battlefield is unparalleled. They do not use gunpowder or simple lasers. They use Gauss weaponry, which magnetically strips a target's molecules away, layer by layer, essentially dissolving an enemy into nothingness in a matter of seconds. Beyond their infantry, they possess world engine ships and tachyon arrows, weapons that can strike a target across the gulfs of time and space with absolute precision. They utilize the shards of the Cetan, the very gods they overthrew, as living batteries. When a Cetan shard is unleashed, it can manipulate gravity, fire, and time, turning the battlefield into a playground of divine destruction. The threat to the warp. Perhaps the most significant threat the Necrons pose is not to the lives of mortals, but to the existence of the Chaos Gods themselves. The Necrons despise the warp. It is a realm of madness and soulfire that is anathema to their cold, logical existence. Using Blackstone technology, the same material found in the pylons of Cadia, the Necrons are capable of creating null zones where the warp cannot reach. If the Necrons were to succeed in their great warding, they could effectively seal real space away from the immaterium. While this would protect the galaxy from demons, it would also mean the soul death of every psychic race, including humanity and the Eldari. To the Necrons, this is a small price to pay for order and the final defeat of their ancient enemies. A galaxy reclaimed. The Necrons are not a unified front. Because Sarek shattered the command protocols before his exile, every tomb world is an independent kingdom. Some, like the Sautek dynasty, seek to build a traditional empire through conquest. Others, like the Nihilak dynasty, are isolationists who simply want to preserve their hoarded treasures. And then there are the madmen. Trazyn the Infinite spends his immortality collecting the history of the galaxy, kidnapping entire armies and heroes to display in his stasis galleries on the world of Salamis. To Trazyn, the war for the galaxy is just a way to find more interesting pieces for his museum. But despite their internal squabbles, the truth remains. The Necrons are inevitable. They do not tire. They do not need to eat or breathe. Every time a Necron falls, it is teleported away to be repaired and sent back into the fray. They are the ultimate survivors of a universe that tried to kill them 1,000,000 times over. As you close your eyes and drift towards sleep, imagine the cold, green light of a tomb world waking up beneath your feet. Imagine the rhythmic thrum of machines that have waited 60 million years to breathe again. The stars were once theirs, and they have the patience of the dead to wait until the stars are theirs once more. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the cold, metallic history of the Necrons. If you enjoyed this dark tale and found it a peaceful companion for your rest, please subscribe to the channel, comment with the name of the Necron dynasty or character that intrigues you most, and share this video with others who seek stories in the night. This is history and fiction for sleep. Rest well, for the great sleep is long, and the masters of the galaxy are finally awake.